Blackpink might be the only group in the world that disappeared without ever really going away. I mean, think about it. After the Born Pink tour ended in 2023, Blackpink almost vanished as a group. No comeback, no promotions, no performances together. And yet somehow it felt like they were, well, everywhere. Jisoo released her solo debut. Jennie landed a song that spent months on the Hot 100. Lisa was suddenly acting in one of HBO's biggest shows. Rosé teamed up with Bruno Mars on a song that basically soundtracked half of 2024. If you were a Blackpink fan, you never really stopped seeing Blackpink. You just stopped seeing Blackpink together. And then, almost 2 years later, all four of them finally came back. New song, new world tour, the reunion everyone had been waiting for. But watching that comeback, I just couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. And no, not because the performances were bad, and not because of the controversy surrounding the opening shows, but because it no longer felt like I was watching the same kind of group. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that Blackpink hasn't actually been operating like a traditional K-pop group for quite a while. It's become something else, and I think that's the real story here. There's one detail in this whole story that barely got talked about, and honestly, I think it explains almost everything that's happened since. At the end of 2023, all four members reached exactly the same crossroads. Jisoo, Jennie, Lisa, and Rosé all had their individual contracts with YG expire within 2 weeks of each other, and then none of them renewed. At the time, the headlines mostly treated these as separate stories. Jisoo launched her own company, Jennie launched hers, Rosé signed somewhere else, and Lisa decided to go fully independent. Individually, none of that was shocking. Lots of K-pop idols eventually want more control over their solo careers. It makes sense. But when you actually step back and look at the full picture, something really unusual had happened. For the first time since Blackpink debuted, there wasn't actually one company managing all four members anymore. You would have been forgiven for thinking that was the beginning of the end, except it wasn't. Because almost immediately afterwards, all four of them turned around and signed another deal with YG. Just not the deal anyone expected. This new contract had nothing to do with Jennie's solo music, nothing to do with Lisa's acting or Rosé's albums or Jisoo's career outside the group. It existed for one reason: Blackpink. That's it. And I think that completely changes how you should think about the group. Because if you stop and picture with what arrangement actually looks like, it's kind of fascinating. These aren't four artists working under one company who occasionally branch out to do solo projects anymore. It's almost the exact opposite. Today, their solo careers are the main event. 4 different companies, 4 different management teams, 4 completely different schedules with 4 separate long-term plans. Blackpink is the only thing they still have in common. It's no longer the center that everything else revolves around. It's the one place 4 incredibly busy careers still overlap. And I think honestly that's an important distinction, because it changes the way that you interpret almost everything people have been arguing about over the last year. You know, when fans say, "Why don't they spend more time together?" Or "Why did this comeback feel different?" They're usually looking for answers inside the performances. But I honestly don't think the answer starts on stage. I think it starts with the fact that Blackpink isn't organized like a normal group anymore. Now, once you look at it that way, the last 2 years start to make a lot more sense. It wasn't really a hiatus. It was just 4 people building genuinely independent careers on a level they probably could never have had if Blackpink had still been the priority. Jennie released a million-selling solo album and headlined her own set at Coachella. Lisa released her own album, made her Hollywood acting debut in a major HBO series, and, well, won a VMA. Jisoo signed a global record deal, landed her first Billboard #1, and expanded her acting career. Then there was Rosé, whose song with Bruno Mars became the kind of hit that reached people who'd never even listened to Blackpink ever. All of this was happening at the same time. 4 separate careers, 4 different teams, 4 schedules that barely overlapped. And that's what makes Blackpink just such an unusual group now. Most K-pop groups never get the chance to build individual careers on the scale while they're still active, let alone all 4 members doing it at once. For those 2 years, Blackpink never really disappeared. It just stopped being the center of the story. So, July 2025 rolls around, and for the first time in 2 years, Blackpink are back. new song, new world tour, and this is where a lot of people start paying attention because the comeback wasn't exactly smooth. The tour opened in Goyang, and the first headlines weren't even about the music. They were about an entire seating section where fans had paid for tickets only to find a huge screen structure blocking most of their view. A lot of people said that it felt like they just paid to stare at a wall. YG apologized within days and refunded everyone in that section. It was the right move, but probably not the first impression that you want for your first tour back. Now, once the performances started, the conversation only got more divided. Plenty of fans loved the new song, loved the choreography, and were just happy to see all 4 members on stage together again. But of course, there were just as many people who felt something was different. They couldn't always explain exactly what it was, but the word that kept coming up was chemistry. Some said it felt less like watching one group perform and more like 4 people sharing the same stage. The song itself didn't do much to settle the debate either. It's a much heavier EDM leaning track that people usually associate with Blackpink, and the music video's headbanging choreography became a meme almost immediately, before people had even decided whether they actually liked the song. And when you look at everything that's happened over the last 2 years, none of that is really that surprising. I mean, you're talking about 4 artists who spent that time building 4 completely separate careers, suddenly trying to lock back into the same rhythm in front of tens of thousands of people. That's a difficult thing for any group to do. Now, here's my take on it. I don't think this is a story about anyone getting lazy, and I don't think it's a company trying to squeeze one last payday out of a fading brand. I think it's just a genuinely difficult situation. I mean, when you're a solo artist, every decision revolves, well, around you. Your sound, your schedule, your creative instincts. Everything is built around one person. One mind. Coming back to a group means trying to line all of that up again after 2 years of intentionally growing in different directions, because that's exactly what made the solo era work. You don't build 4 genuinely successful solo careers by still thinking the same way you did when Blackpink debuted. And that's the biggest difference. Back then, the group was the priority and the solo work had to fit around it. Now, it's the other way around. Blackpink is the thing all 4 of them have to choose to make room for alongside 4 already established careers. That's honestly just a much harder version of being in a group than the one they started with, and probably a harder version than most groups ever had to deal with. But I want to be fair here, because it would be easy to end this video on a cynical note, but I don't think that would be accurate. You see, back in April, months before the tour was even announced, Lisa and Rosé showed up to Jennie's solo set at Coachella. Not performing, not promoting anything, just standing in the crowd, cheering her on, and then hanging around backstage taking photos afterward. Nobody scheduled that. There was no group content to push, no PR team behind it, no reason to do it at all except that they just wanted to be there for her. That's the part a purely cynical read on all of this just misses. Over the last 2 years, the paperwork might have changed, but what's actually shared between them as people didn't change one bit. So, what actually is Blackpink now? Maybe the answer is simpler than most people make it out to be. They're 4 solo artists with 4 different careers who still choose, every so often, to become Blackpink again. And honestly, that's maybe what makes them interesting now. Not because they're the most active group in K-pop, no, but because almost everything pulling them apart is also the reason they still work. Every comeback is a choice, not an obligation. That's also what makes the future so hard to predict. There's reportedly another album coming next year, which suggests all 4 of them still see value in coming back together. But nobody really knows what Blackpink looks like 5 or 10 years from now. Maybe not even Blackpink. What we do know is that the conversation has changed. A few years ago, people were asking whether the members should go solo. Now the question is almost the complete opposite. After building these massive individual careers, how do you keep a group like this feeling like a group? Personally, I think that's a far more interesting question than whether one comeback performance was good or bad. But let me know what you think. Is this version of Blackpink something that can keep working for years, or has the solo era changed the group in a way that's impossible to fully reverse? I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. I've got a lot more coming.